Nee, we wachten tot het licht uitgaat. Leuk. We wachten tot dat licht uitgaat. Maar...
Some issue with the signal from your laptop.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here, first of all. I've had already a wonderful time here with all of you. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here, let's say that. My name is Kevin Thiels. I have a long experience as a developer, a solution architect. I've been in the Drupal community for many, many years now. And I am shareholder and CTO at a company called We actually have two, an agency and a studio, where we have services and products. Today I'm here to talk about taming complex Drupal projects. You could also just say taming complex projects with AI assistant specification and codebase analysis. What I would like to invite you into is the world of the fact that complex projects, they rarely fail because of the code itself. Okay? Mostly when developers are working on things with the best intentions, they build, according to them, working code. So they fail actually because of the intention that is different, not clear, the implementation and the reality that are drifting apart. So three things that should actually be the same thing. Is first of all the intention. What is the intention? These are specifications, tickets, emails, and expectations from stakeholders. The implementation itself is then your modules, your config, content types, and so on and so on. And then the reality. What is the system doing today in a production environment? If these are not aligned, we are talking about a gap. Okay. Now, why do long-lived Drupal platforms actually then drift? Because, for example, the documentation is aging way faster than the code. We all love to work on new functionalities, but if we're being honest, if somebody can show me the first project where the documentation is always exactly up to date, I would be very happy to see that. even though we have AI now that can really help doing those things. Okay? It's not something that you do as a one-time shot. When you're in the project mode, everything mostly goes well. But once you're in the run cycle of your application, things get treated a little bit differently. So, for example, then the tribal knowledge that's walking out the door, people, they do leave. Partners rotate, product owners, they change, and most of the information is in people's heads. The specifications that were signed off are also not kept alive. The BRDs and the acceptance criteria, for example, are becoming historical artifacts, and on the day that they are actually approved. And the fact that we have custom versus readable, custom modules, hooks, and config overrides outnumber the contrib patterns that people know. So what is this actual cost that you have of drifting? Well, the entire delivery is at risk. Estimates miss because the team are discovering undocumented behavior during sprints. The quality is also at risk. Regression is slipping through because acceptance tests were written against yesterday's understanding, or longer, two weeks ago. Acceptance risk, the stakeholders, they disagree on what was done or what the definition of done actually means, even if you have a definition of done for those of you who work in an agile way, because nobody can point to the current source of truth. You have a ticket and a documentation that are telling different things as well. So all the three are visible in your retrospectives, but none of them show up in your unit tests or tests. So when we are talking about AI assistant, what are we actually talking about? We are talking about an analysis layer that is on top of what you're already doing and that has become part of your process. The process that you have today, the way how you are going to deliver software is probably okay. So you don't want to introduce AI tooling and mechanisms that enforce you to change the way you're working. Okay? AI should help you. It should be an assistant. It should not be a game changer for you to change your existing workflow. So your repositories, your specifications, your issues, the Confluence or any other thing that you have that should not be replaced or changed how you're using it. So the goal is to not replace developers or testers. It's not the goal to replace people. No generated patches merged behind your back. Humans stay in the loop for all of the decisions. And what I'm seeing is that we are in an era of where it becomes really complex because everybody's saying AI, AI, and believe me, I've been doing AI for a very long time now. It's not because you have AI as a tool and you can do things autonomously that you kick out the people, okay? Basically. What you want to do is you want to leverage people. You want to assist people, bring them to a next level. You want to get the boring stuff out of there and automate those things. You want to augment insights. You want to have control over your delivery and your acceptance clarity. If I may ask a question, how many of you truly and honestly, when you are in a project, can say, we are 53% done? You raise hands. So, but these are the questions that we all get, right? So these are the things that we want to have AI and where AI actually can really shine and bring in value. So testing, documentation, gap analysis, bringing clarity into project, whether that is the percentage of scope that is delivered, the budgets that you're maintaining. This is something that not only affects developers. If you are adopting AI, it is an organizational change. It's not just developers now have a fancy new tool to play with, and we just see some tokens being burned. The 3 pillars that this lives on. First of all, you need to introspect your code base. You need to surface the real system behavior from the code, the config, and your integrations. Second pillar, specification analysis. You want to turn the scattered intentions into structured and queryable requirements. And then, based on those things, what you can do is a gap analysis. Compare specification versus code versus tests to actually the surface that is missing, deviating, and undocumented. So let's dive into these pillars. For the code base introspection, what the system actually does is you're going to look at your content model topology, so your content types, fields, and so on, the hookings, the integration touch points that you have, permissions and the role reality, custom module development, configuration drift. Again, today we are talking about Drupal, but if you leave the word Drupal out of it, this actually applies to software development as a whole. Specification analysis. So imagine that you have several sources of intention of what needs to be built. Basically, this could be a combination of some Jira issues, some Word documents, PDFs, some emails even, and all of these inputs are actually the Bible of what you need to build. Okay? So you need to look at them as one whole. Even if you have a confluence, are we sure that that email that we got from the product owner yesterday ended up into a documented piece in our confluence or into a new epic or a new story in Jira? And then there's also my favorite one, instant messagings like Slack. How many times are we sending messages to each other like, can we make that button into a different color? And we change it, but it's not documented anywhere. Just happened and nobody knows it. So how can you then still say like all of the things we needed to do are actually done? So you want to transform all of these sources into actually structured requirements. Also a beauty where AI can really help you with. Whether you define your requirements in that syntax or in any other syntax stories, that's a bit irrelevant. I'm just saying that you need to have them structured and queryable. And then the third pillar is the gap analysis. So, first of all, what is missing? What is specified in all of these requirements, but did we not implement yet? Then the deviations. What is implemented, but behavior is different. And one example that I always gave, or give, because I still do give that, is imagine that you have a requirement where at some point, if you do not have a correct permission to access a certain path, that you are getting an access denied, for example. But in reality, when I test this, I'm getting a page not found, whether that's correct or not, but I am dealing with a deviation. As a human, I could arguably decide like, I can live with that. The implementation is okay. But here we have an opportunity to really judge, is this 100% correctly implemented? Is it partially implemented? So we can talk about deviations. And then we can bring the transparency into this, because for me, it's not an issue if there is an issue. There is an issue if we don't know that there is an issue. Okay? So I would rather have a list of deviations where I need to figure out what are the attention points, what are we going to do with that, versus not knowing that there are problems, and then 6 months later, because somebody used that certain feature, comes back and we don't even know how it originated, where it came from, and what we're going to do with it. And then the undocumented parts. So presenting the implementation with no matching requirements anywhere. What could a gap report potentially look like? This is just one example. It's actually very simple. I have requirements or behavior, and I need to be able to see whether they are in the specification, in the code, and in my testings, regardless of which form of tests you do. I'm talking global tests. Okay. So from static documentation to a living system knowledge. This is the next point that helps. There was a long time ago, and in some projects it still happens, that the client is asking for a Word document as a deliverable for the documentation. Word has gotten way better, especially when you use it in SharePoint or in M365. Confluence is also a very good example of where you can make your documentation living. But with living, I don't mean that every now and then you update it. With living, I mean that it's constantly being updated according to what I'm doing in the project. And this is very important because most projects, again, Drupal, but it counts for basically any project that I've encountered, is you do such a good job when you do the initial shipping, when you make the initial product. But it needs some love and attention also in the run phase. Okay. I'm not going to read all of the bullet points. You probably already read them by now. So what we want to do is we want to have evidence. We want to generate from the implementation actual evidence that these things are implemented. So traceability, for example, by default, an audit ready on demand, because that also happens. You get requests of where are we in the project and so on. Less manual UAT scripting and a faster handover. These are all key points on or big advantages that you get by working in such a way. Here is one requirement on the right side where, again, this is an example, but where you could say, like, this was my specification, it's mentioned here, this is the route with specific control, for example, this is the access, and these are the tests, and this is the release where it's in. Wouldn't that be amazing? All doable today manually, but easier with AI. But can you raise some hands, please? The right side, when you look at that, do you do it as strictly as this? Is it all this documented, or? No, not too many hands. So that, again, this would be the ideal world, but for traceability, for figuring out things, that's where you want to go to, okay? It will relieve you from a lot of pains and questions. So our approach in practice, what we do at Aperta also, using AI, is we do an intake. We look at the repository, we look at sources from specifications, tickets, but no production data. Then we are going to index all of these things so that they become queryable, so that we can actually ask intelligent questions, whether that is via a chat functionality or via a simple search. And then we are going to analyze all of this data, the gap report, dependency map, and then the acceptance evidence. Then we are going to be able to do reviews on this, to check what was implemented, what is not yet implemented, what was not 100% implemented as intended. And then we can operate on this. We can refactor it, we can change it. Okay. So we want to do that in days, not in weeks. If this exercise you would do for an existing project and you would do it manually, there's a reason why we don't do it manually. So we want to deliver in a predictable way without changing your workflow. Again, how you're working today as a developer on your machine using a GitLab, using CI/CD pipelines, you're probably very happy with, or happy enough with how that works, because everything can be better, obviously. But you want to earlier see those gaps during your refinement, not in UAT. What I will not go into this is the entire V model of testing, where you have like a bug on one side and then it becomes way cheaper if your client has to figure out the bug than you as a developer has to figure out the bug. Smaller, rework in smaller batches because you will find the deltas way quicker. And then shared, it needs to be a baseline that everybody can point to, especially in steering committees. If you have reports that shareholders can look at and see like, yes, we are 53% done, and yes, these things are partially implemented, we need to iterate on these things. That's going to give you quite some new power. So no new sprint ceremonies that are going to be introduced, no new ID, and no new CI/CD pipeline. When the acceptance becomes evidence-based, sorry, as you heard, I'm getting a bit sick, I think. Is this what we asked for? That becomes predictable and transparent and not an assumption anymore. So every feature links to a requirement, to code, to testing. Every change is flagging which requirement is affected. And every release comes up with an up-to-date acceptance map. And every disagreement can be resolved against the same source. What doesn't it change? The way how you work. Your editor, your architecture, how your team is looking like, your pipelines, how you do updates, for example, and your entire ticketing workflow. Okay? So you want to read from what you have. What did we learn the hard way? When we are using AI tooling to achieve all of these things, is that summaries still need human review. Okay? As much as I am an advocate of AI, still the human needs to be somewhere in the loop. I leave it up to you where exactly that is. Because it might give you, threat finding is a lead, but it's not a verdict. Senior developers are going to still benefit a lot from it, and you can focus more on the nice things, which is feature development, and not all of the other things. Indexing legacy costs more upfront. Okay. Security and privacy first, that was also a challenge. So we have all of these frontier models. What about the privacy on those things? When you use APIs, like for example from Anthropic and OpenAI, to name a few, they all state that they do not train on the data you send to them via the API. It's one of the most common questions I get. Can we trust that? Well, according to their statement, yes. Does the government really know that? I don't know. But this is a concern that we had. Also, when we are doing open client discussions, it's a question that we get. How are you going to tackle this? We also use a lot of open source models. There's always a trade-off. Open source models, while some of them are becoming amazingly good, are not yet at the level of all of those frontier models. That will probably change because those things get better. But I'm sketching the situation of where we are today. The living documentation needs to actually live somewhere. We've seen that, for example, if we generate living documentation constantly, that probably the Git repository is a very efficient way to store the documentation in. It's very close to your code base, but you can also, send it to your Confluence if you use that. Governance is a design question. Who owns the gap list? Who closes a finding and decides before the first report lands? Meaning that if we do see some gaps, are you going to go to one of the developers, to the product owner, who's going to decide on what the outcome should be? Because it can be tricky, If, for example, and I've seen that also in practically, if the implementation documents mention that the button should be pink, for example, and then we had a meeting where they decided to put it in purple, but that was mentioned in the meeting, but it was never documented anywhere. So you have actually a gap. So who is responsible on also making the decision? Is it going to stay pink or are we going to go for the purple? And AI is not a substitute for tests. Okay, tests tell you whether it will work, and analysis tells you whether it matches the intent. But you need both. You cannot just write tests based on the code you have, because if you write tests on the code you have, it's probably going to show you it's working because the code is there. Okay, that does not give you the fact that it's maybe different from what you needed to do. So there are some 5 key takeaways I would like you all to take with you after this session, which is that drift is structural and not accidental. Okay, you need to plan for these things. Code is the most honest specification. With a Word document describing what needs to be built, you can have discussions over them. Oh, I saw it differently in my head, or we talked about that, but we actually forgot what we're going to do. Well, what is in code is actually what was built and how the system will behave. Catch gaps before they become an actual rework. So you want to go very fast with the spec code comparison and not figure out like, oh, we're drifting and we're already in UAT, and one of the testers or the client figured out that there's a problem with that. That causes, at the time, we talk about bugs. Clients don't talk about bugs, they talk about frustrations. And if you have enough of those frustrations, they probably will look at new feature developments with different eyes. They'll be like, yeah, there's probably gotta be something with that. Treat the documents as a build artifact. So you want to generate the factual part, and you want to write the interpretive part. The same workflow, don't change your workflow, but have better evidence. You don't want to change how you work today. I cannot stress this enough, okay? I'm one of those people who absolutely dislikes if a new tool is going to dictate me that I have to change how I work. I like how I work. To give you an actual client case, the same project with the same team, and we did 2 approaches to really test out how the effects were. So when we look at the testing scenarios, manual testing, which is the black numbers there, we made around 100 test cases, give or take. And what we noticed is when we used AI, that we had so many more tests. We had to fine-tune that because of 2 things. First of all, the manual tests were mostly the happy parts. It's very easy for us to say this is what it needs to do and then write that in a test. But it's not so easy like what shouldn't it do, figuring out all of these scenarios. And then edge cases are even more complex because we might not think of a specific scenario, how to use or abuse a certain form to get to a point. AI is very, very good at helping with that. That's why we got way more. So while the 100 manual tests were good and necessary, they are insufficient to prove that the system as such is working. Okay. When we look at the documentation, we did the same exercise, and there we went to 150 manually written pages to 800, up to the point where you can actually debate on like who reads the manual. But you know, I also, as I said, like I'm almost an AI evangelist, I would say. I also believe that the new documentation, which is much more detailed, is going to help AI in those pieces, in those developments. So documentation might not just be for humans anymore. Okay. Also generating all of the diagrams and the flow charts, which doesn't take much time for AI, and I don't want to start on those anymore. So yeah, these are some things that we actually learned. We did it up to a point where we built a product around it. Because we're like, oh, well, we can use that, and probably people will have same issues. Our clients for sure had the issues, and not just in the project that we were doing for them. Okay, the use case that I showed for this client, we do the Drupal work for them, but they have a lot of .NET as well. And they asked us, like, this automated way, can you not introduce this for our .NET as well? And that's why we decided, let's build a product around this. So ASUP, as you can see on the t-shirt, you've probably seen the boot and so on. We focus on continuous code-based introspection, spec and scenario libraries, the gap analysis, and those documentations and the evidence. We do a lot more because, like with any product, our scope is defined by our clients. We made a migrator assistant, for example, to go from a legacy technology to a new one and generate those insights. All ripple effects of understanding what needs to be built versus what is built. So how do we realize these pillars? The code-based introspection, we use tree-sitter to parse, among other things, but tree-sitter is probably the most important one there, to parse every file. We use endpoint and function dependency maps. We are going to embed, in a semantic way, an index, incremental reindex on each commit. So every single code change, we are going to iteratively loop over the changes and define impact. For specs, we are going to look at, for example, Jira, Redmine. We use Redmine internally a lot. It's open source. It doesn't look very nice, but it's very, very good. Scenario library with quality scoring, documentation generation, and then also hallucination warnings on the output. Okay. Hallucinations are a real thing. And that's why a human in the loop is still very much important. AI by design wants to help you and will try to help you with an, I call it like a lie from a best friend. The gap analysis is where we're going to do the matching, pardon me, untested endpoints and flows, sorry, the test coverage, and then readiness and health scores. Since we are in the Drupal community and the entire ecosystem is based on taking and giving, we are giving away free lifetime licenses to everybody who is interested in using this tool so that you don't have to build it yourself. I think we still have some time for some questions, if there are any. I didn't see the 5-minute board yet. Ah, okay. Are there any questions? Yes.
So now we're in a situation that we are replacing some software as services tools, like we replaced one that we used to log time. So if one has a custom one and wants to use yours, do you support also making like connectors to this?
So
to a custom one, yeah.
Are we talking custom, like custom software, programming
custom software,
languages?
Yeah, custom software.
So we don't have any boundaries, basically. We are going to parse all files that we have, and we are going to understand these languages. Again, AI is helping us learn new things, and it's going to already know most of the common languages. Okay. So, for example, if you have a Drupal project, we have the Drupal support in it. If we don't have the support in it, we have clever internal systems that are figuring out how these definitions are relating to each other. So the answer to that question would be yes, we can do that. If this case is very, very specific, what we will do is, well, we won't leave you alone. We will just have a conversation about it and see if the tool is actually behaving correctly.
Thank you.
Yes?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering about privacy and this tool. How do you handle the data of the projects?
So the data itself, are we talking database?
I mean, in
Confidential?
the sense of privacy, because at the end you're receiving a lot of information for an external project.
Mhm.
It's like sending the information to as you said before, when you send information or the code to a model, they say that they are not doing anything with that.
Yeah.
You have to trust. In your case, you are receiving a lot of information, sensible information even. So how do you deal with that? Do you store the information? Is something temporary, or how do you deal with that?
So when it comes to the code, we will always have the conversation on which models we are going to use and if the client is okay with the privacy statement. Okay. If you believe that you don't want to send data, for example, like code, to Anthropic, then there's not really much we can do about that except using open source models to do the same exercise. Then we can process them locally. However, the quality, I see truly some differences. Open source models are not yet there. So that is a decision that you have to make when it comes to confidential user data, for example. Those things, they reside hopefully in a database of sorts, which is not something we look at. We look at your code base, we look at your Git repository. If it would be in your Git repository, then yes, we might send it over unless you ignore it. Does that answer your question?
I was thinking more in if you store some data apart from what you send to the model.
Oh,
if
sorry.
Your company stores any information or something.
Yeah. So what we do is inside Belgium specifically, we have data centers, and what we do is we will make a replica for its caching, basically, because we make a replica of your repository. We have to look into the repository, and as soon as we are done with this exercise, we throw it away. So we do not keep it for a long time. We keep it only for the duration of the exercise that needs to happen. When you make a code change, we will clone it again. It will be a fresh instance, and we will look at the differences between all of the information that is stored, which is features, tests, and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Do you support connections to other tools than Jira, like Teamworks, Notion?
At this moment, we have connectivity with Redmine and Jira, but the entire scope of the product is determined by our clients. I've got a request a couple of weeks ago for Monday.com, and as soon as that client decides to join in on the platform, we will make the integration with Monday.com. Those things we do that ad hoc as requested.
And you mentioned Microsoft, Google Docs?
Google Docs we can actually connect to already, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for the interesting talk. How do you manage the chat communications and indexing that and making that relevant for?
So it's a very interesting question. It's also one of the examples. Another one could be, how do you capture what was said in a meeting? I do think I have a solution for that, which is not yet implemented, but one way would be to actually have a chatbot that can connect to your Slack, for example, or whatever communications, and that can keep transcriptions of the things that are being said and determine if there is relevance to the scope of this project. Another thing would be, and that I do see much more happening in meetings, hopefully you guys too, is that there's always a bot joining for making the transcriptions and the summaries of meetings. Once we connect those things together, it's the same thing as connecting your Jira instance or uploading a PDF, for example. So I think there are solutions to this. We don't have them in place yet today.
All right, thank you.
There's also a case where we are migrating documentation, and can you handle kind of that, where some of the stuff is in one format, you want it in another, and just making sure that you help with the move across of documentation.
So if it's just moving the documentation, or is it really restructuring, reorganizing?
Probably both, yeah.
That is a specific subset that is not in our product today, but I'm happy to have a chat with you and look deeper into this. We do have a migration plugin for a code base to code base. Imagine you're going from PHP to Java or the other way around, that we can actually do track. But we don't have that for documentation to documentation yet.
For cases where even that temporary cloning of data is something that can happen, do you have any plans to make any self-hosted or something like that options maybe in the future? Or is it like core part of your business that this works as a software as a service?
How it's working today is actually the intention. Why? Because we don't want to impact any workflows. Okay, so ASUP as a product is completely next to your workflow. There is no impact. We look at your repository, we look at your blueprinting, and we make results. For example, create all of your BHAT tests. And then we deliver this back to your repository. What we do not do by design, by deliberate choice, is execute your tests. Because you probably have a CI/CD pipeline, you probably have a mechanism to execute them. So we are just providing you with the intel, let's say. Okay. However, I did already get requests like, oh, can you not make an agent so that we install this agent? And yes, there are many possibilities still. But today, that's how the software is working. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, then I would like to thank you all for joining. Much appreciated, and I will see you around. Come by all of the booth.